This is a revision guide on creating your directorial vision for Woyzeck as part of the Unit 4 Section B examination. Now, I'm going to start by thinking about and revising what actually a directorial vision is and how it's constructed. A directorial vision is essentially the driving force behind your whole performance. It is how you want to construct your performance. And there are 4 elements within that. There's the content, the context, style, and aesthetics. So content is the things that you are focusing on within the play, the themes, the issues. The context, then, is how those themes and issues are both relatable to us as a modern audience and making their bridge to the original performance conditions. The style is obviously then the way in which you are going to act and perform, and that to communicate to us. And the aesthetics is how it looks, the set, the costumes, the props, and how it feels. All of those 4 are totally and utterly interconnected, and decisions that you make in one have an impact on the other elements. So be careful when you're constructing or revising your directorial vision to make sure that all those 4 elements are tied together and make sense. So I'm going to begin by thinking about the vision of content. Now that really is the objective of your play. That's the most central point. It's the driving force behind your performance and what you want to communicate to your audience. So we talked a lot about that in the process of learning about Woyzeck, and lots of different ideas came up as to what were the central themes of the play, what was the thing that we need to communicate to the audience most. Some of them were the more simpler ones, like the madness of Woyzeck, to the manipulation of Woyzeck by those in power, such as the captain or the doctor or the drum major, to Woyzeck as the tragic hero, the underdog, the everyman, or the person who is just doing their job but having their lives manipulated by those who are in charge and who are in power. And then another one which is quite important and we all focused on and enjoyed was the story of love between Woyzeck and Marie, or the story of that relationship, if not love, and the way that Woyzeck puts Marie upon that pedestal, and then the consequences of those expectations and those desires not being met. And what you need to do to make sure when you're revising this part of the course is to make sure that your directorial vision is complete, that it is clear to the audience that you are focusing on the demise of Woyzeck because of the expectations of his relationship with Marie going wrong, or how Woyzeck is being manipulated by those around him, or whether he's a tragic hero. And all the way through your directorial vision, it needs to be justifiable, believable, possible, and most importantly, consistent. Every scene of this play needs to link to your directorial vision. It can't just be key specific scenes. Having said that, there will be key specific scenes that drive your performance. Of course there is. Scene 2 might be the most important scene for your production because it establishes the relationship between Marie and Woyzeck, and from then onwards we see that relationship become more and more destructive. So there are going to be key scenes. However, every scene needs to tie up and link to your directorial vision. Within that, of course, there also has to be things like it needs to be justifiable. We can't just go completely off on a tangent and create something that is not really justifiable in the terms of the characters and the characters' histories. You know, I'm thinking that we can't suddenly make Woyzeck a psychopath, and he's always been a psychopath right from birth, because he clearly isn't and hasn't been. This is something that has happened to him recently. And so therefore it also needs to be believable. If you create something, a directorial vision, which the audience just do not believe is possible, then it's going to fall apart, and the examiner will see that too. And actually, you will see that, because you won't be able to get that consistency in your answers. So all those decisions that you take about the directorial vision and the themes and the content need to be consistent, especially with the characters. How do those characters fit in with each other, and those relationships between those characters fit with your vision? So once we've got our key themes that we want to focus on, we need to think about the context. And the context relates to a modern audience and the original performance context. So we've got to kind of find a right balance here between how we're going to get the modern audience to connect to the play, how we are going to understand and connect to it, without losing the original performance context of it. It's a fine and difficult balance. We've been to see some plays where we felt that it hasn't worked, and we've been to see plays where that has worked. And it's a very, very difficult balance. So we need to first of all think about some of the original performance conditions and contexts. So here's a few facts that we need to think about and remember, and to make sure that we refer to in our answers. The Woyzeck was written, published and performed at different times. So Woyzeck, first of all, was written during the end of the 18th century, during a time of huge political and social unrest across the whole of Europe. And we can see that contextually in the way it's written and the focus of that performance. And at the time of writing, Buchner was heavily influenced by the movement in art called Sturm und Drang. Sorry, my German isn't that great. It means storm and stress. And there was a movement of young male writers who were concerned with the trials and tribulations of ordinary, common men. The common man. The concept of the everyman. Which Woyzeck definitely is, that one individual person. And it's about their plight, their social injustice, their way through the world despite all the things that are happening to them. So within Woyzeck, it's his progress through the world despite the captain, the doctor, the drum major, even Marie, trying to steer him in different directions, trying to control his life. So the play definitely has those connotations within it. It was first published in 1878, perhaps not so relevant for us, but it was published during a wave of modernism in art which explored the difference in human psyche. And remember, it was published after Buchner's death, so we might think about why this play was published at this point. And yes, it does explore the human psyche and how humans deal with being controlled, and how humans deal with expectations of relationships and how those change and develop. And then the performance was in 1913, which is 70 years after the political turmoil that led to a unified Germany. So the political background of the performance is very different to the one in which it was written. So why perform it then? You know, Germany was on the brink of war at that point, and perhaps it shows how that audience in 1913 felt about the situation that they were in, of being ruled by Kaiser Wilhelm, who was soon to go to war, who was disliked in Europe, who had a very controlling sense over the direction of the country. And how did the every person, the everyman, the individual fit into that? So then we need to think about the modern context, the context of today, and how those original contexts fit into the audience of 2014. How will we find it interesting and informative, as much as someone who watched it in 1913 where do those similarities lie? Whilst looking at the vision of context, there's one very important question that we need to consider, and that is whether we modernise the text or not. When I say modernise the text, it's not the words of the text, but it's the setting. Whether we place the play in Afghanistan or a war of the 21st century rather than a war of the 18th, 19th century, or even in the First World War. And why do we do that? Obviously making it into a modern setting makes it really obvious to the audience as to the statement that you're making. That this is a private in the army of today, so we can clearly see that link. Or whether we go with something a bit more Brechtian. Brecht heavily, liked the idea of performing plays that were in the past, because he felt that actually if we looked at plays that were about today, we didn't look at them properly. But if we looked at plays set in the past and then translated that to how we feel about today, then we were able to see those connections better. That's what he felt. If you decide to modernise the text, you have to modernise the whole thing, all the way through. The whole part of the whole vision needs to be put into that modern day context, not just bits of it. And it needs to be thorough and it needs to be complete. Once we've made decisions about content and context, we can then look at visions of style. And when I mean style, I mean that's the kind of way that we're going to perform it. The naturalistic, Stanislavski approach, Brechtian theatre of epic, physical theatre, abstract theatre. This is quite difficult. I think that really, ultimately, we're looking at something that is very Brechtian, very epic theatre, where we can use elements of naturalism to create naturalistic characters, whereas we can't do the same for set. We can't recreate a circus. We can't recreate the rooms that they are in because the scenes are so short and the action moves from place to place to place to place really, really quickly. So that suggests a more epic style of theatre where we can focus on developing realistic characters but place them into more symbol places. We could do it as abstract theatre, and that's possible. But I think in the context of what we're looking at, I think a more epic theatre is probably more appropriate. Finally then, we've got the vision of aesthetics, which we need to consider, although with the questions and in the exam, I would focus more on, I wouldn't say focus more on, I would do the questions about character and interpretation rather than the questions on set and design. However, we need to have an awareness of that because it's important. So when we think about aesthetics, we think about the way it looks. So we're thinking about set, we're thinking about costume, we're thinking about props. So you need to have that in mind as well when you're creating your directorial vision. So those four elements create that directorial vision. Neither one is more important, but there definitely is a starting point, and that's more about the content. And decisions about each one, influence how you're going to approach the other elements of it. Finally, some really key important things is you need to try to keep the original performance values in your performance and indeed refer to them in the exam. Try to retain the spirit of the original text. But at the same time, let the play reflect the issues and values of today. Make sure you carry all your ideas throughout the whole text, and don't be vague about your ideas. Go into as much detail as you possibly can. Do not cut corners. Okay, so that's a little bit of revision on directorial vision. I'll let you work on that, and then we'll do some more revision videos soon. Thank you.